In the previous video, we looked at the project application process and we looked at the concept note. We had a quick look at the link between the concept note and the project proposal and why it is beneficial to understand those links. In this video, we'll take a closer look at the project proposal. In particular, we will focus on the links and demonstrate how paying early attention to key parts of the project proposal before submitting the concept note can make sense. We'll focus on the parts of the project proposal that POs ask about the most. Project proposals must be submitted by the advertised submission deadline. Project proposals are then endorsed by the proposing forum or other fora as required by the eligibility rules of some funding sources. All project proposals are then quality assessed by the Secretariat. The Secretariat uses 5 quality criteria: relevance, impact, effectiveness, sustainability and efficiency. Each part of the project proposal aligns to one of these criteria. Once a satisfactory rating is achieved for each criteria, the proposal will then be submitted to BMC for final approval. The responses to the first 3 questions in the project proposal are shared with the concept note. They often require no more development in the project proposal, but the Secretariat may ask for clarifications during quality assessment. Before turning to the question about your project outputs, it's important to note that projects in APEC are based on a simple underlying logic that reflects a causal chain between the project's outputs or activities, the project's outcomes, and the overall project objective. These are all collectively financed by the project's budget. To explain the causal chain, let's look at this. The objective is the overarching goal, purpose, or intention of your project. Outcomes are the changes, impacts, or benefits that your project generates. Outputs are the activities undertaken within a project or the products of a project which are undertaken or created to achieve the outcomes. The project budget describes the resources that support your project. Stating the project outputs, for example, a workshop, a best practices guidebook, summary report, can be a straightforward task. But defining a set of project level outcomes can be a more challenging task. POs should be careful to avoid confusing a project's outputs with a project's outcomes, and further, care should be taken to avoid confusing the outcomes with the project's objective. The program logic in your project doesn't need to be complex. Most projects are 1 to 2 years in duration with a small set of outcomes linked to 3 to 4 outputs.
Now, with all that in mind, let's look at the question about outputs. Outputs are the drivers within your project. Outputs are the things that need to happen to realize your outcomes and are typically activities like workshops and seminars, research, reporting, and so on. List the outputs in the chronological order they will be delivered. Describe them with a short title and use that title consistently throughout the project proposal. Describe the outputs in detailed terms, and also describe any supporting activities. You may also describe the benefits that the outputs is creating for participants or beneficiaries. Focus on benefits that can be directly attributed to your project. We strongly recommend to review the sample response for this question that's provided in the document called Guidance, Completing the Revised Concept Note and Project Proposal Templates. The next question is about your project outcomes. We know that outcomes are the changes, impacts, or benefits that will flow from the delivery of your outputs. Outcomes happen as a consequence of your project, so they're best expressed in the past tense. For example, practice guidelines implemented, and hence policies adopted. Your project outcomes must support your stated project objectives. It is best to place your outcomes in a numbered list so they are clear. The outcomes must be dependent on your project, meaning that they occur because your project happened. Avoid outcomes which are too high level, as it may be hard to demonstrate a direct link to your project. It is feasible that some project outcomes or elements of project outcomes occur after the formal completion of your project. If that is the case, you need to make this clear in the project proposal, and you need to explain how you will continue to monitor and evaluate that outcome at the end of your project. You can report back to the Secretariat after the project, or use the annual longer-term evaluation of APEC projects as an opportunity to report further progress. We also recommend you review the sample response for the question on outcomes that's provided in the document mentioned earlier. Let's look at the question about beneficiaries. You should have an early sense of your project beneficiaries. It is difficult to build a capacity building project without understanding where capacity needs to be built. Who are the direct project participants and users of the outputs? Describe their qualifications, level of expertise, roles and levels of responsibility, gender, economies represented, government departments, APEC foreign involvement, etc. Explain how they will use and benefit from the project. Who else will benefit from the project and how? Let's now take a look at the question on gender. Women's full participation in economic activity is critical to the achievement of sustainable economic development in the region, and you must read the gender criteria in the guidebook on APEC project. Your project must align with one or more of the 5 gender pillars. Steps you can take to support gender in your project might include using gender analysis to design your project methodologies and inputs, such as surveys, including women in the planning and implementation of a project, taking steps to ensure equitable participation by men and women, making special efforts to disseminate project results to women, and using sex disaggregated data for project assessment. Set clear and quantifiable indicators against which gender equity or inclusiveness targets may be measured at the completion of the project. Examples could be the female participation rate, number of female and male speakers, etc. The question on work plan is a key part of your project proposal. Your work plan is a schedule that shows the specific steps behind implementation of each output. Ensure you allocate enough time for each output and activity. Processes like contracting and event nomination takes months, not weeks. Don't forget to schedule your reporting deliverables to the Secretariat, the annual project monitoring report, and the completion report, which is due within 2 months that follows the project completion date. Use a matrix and provide 3 columns: time, task, and deliverables. Monitoring and evaluation, or M&E, is central to your project management. Monitoring is the process of ensuring that you are implementing your project according to plan. That is, you are delivering what you set out to do in your BMC-approved project proposal. Evaluation is the process of assessing whether you were successful in achieving your outcomes and, in turn, your project objectives. You should establish measures or indicators for each output. For example, target participation rate at the project's event. You must set an appropriate target for female participation, including female speakers and experts. Each outcome must be accompanied by at least one indicator, which you set to assess whether or not you have achieved the outcome. Don't rely solely on indicators which just record the physical aspect of outputs, like simply counting the people attending a workshop. Alternatively, you could measure the degree to which participants' knowledge levels were increased as a result of your workshop. Because your indicators measure change or impact, it is vital that you understand the starting point or baseline before your project. You could, for example, survey levels of participants' knowledge before the workshop. You could also undertake research to understand the state of play before your project, such as doing a survey, desk research, or other information gathering work. Once you understand the baseline situation, you can then describe what level of change your project is targeting. Your indicator can then be used to measure if the target has been reached or not. We also recommend you review the sample response for the question on monitoring and evaluation that's provided in the document mentioned earlier. Finally, let's look at the budget of your project proposal. An APEC-funded project budget has 4 elements. Direct labor describes the contracting and work undertaking planned for your project, as well as the honoraria to be paid to eligible speakers and experts. The travel costs for speakers and experts and travel-eligible participants are shown in 2 travel sections. Other items describe costs associated with hosting events, such as venue hire or specialized equipment for virtual events, and other costs. The guidebook on APEC project deals extensively with project expenses, disbursements, or contracting, so you're encouraged to refer to the guidebook. The next video is the final in this series of 4. In that video, we'll spend a few minutes going over some key tips for you as you prepare your concept note and your project proposal.